Hi, I'm Jamie, and I am the creator of One World, Your Story, where we bring people together. And right now, we need this more than ever. The murder of George Floyd, the latest of countless Black Americans to be murdered at the hands of police in America, has set off a chain reaction across the United States. People are angry, people are hurt, and rightfully so. We cannot stand by and allow this to continue any longer. It's time to use our voices and bring this conversation out into the open for good. So, join us for this episode of The Floyd Files.
Coming from me, right, I feel like there's a lot of problems right now in the continent Africa that some people don't even want to even talk about what is going on in the States. Because it was like, why do we want to even talk about or advocate for these people when at home we don't even like each other?
Okay, cool, Samson, yay! So I've put, and by the way, hello everyone who is joining us. It is Saturday, June. What's the date today, Samson? Okay, Saturday, June 27th, 2020. Yeah. Which I don't know how all of a sudden we're in June, end of June, but here we are. And Samson and I met, did we meet in March or did we meet in April?
I think I got your email sometime around April. I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's through a colleague because your colleague is a friend of mine.
Princess.
Yeah, Princess, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. I think it was, let's say, end of March, early April, we met talking about the coronavirus and just your experience living in Port Harcourt. Is that how you say it, right?
Yeah.
As just living through the coronavirus. And I reached out to you, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, because I had seen an article about how representatives from, was it each country in Africa had a representative for the UN demands they do something about racism, right? So I reached out to you because I was like, okay, let's hear about what's actually happening in Africa. I want to hear third-party perspective about what you all think about what's going on, what's being talked about maybe outside of the US, and give you a chance to ask me questions. So before we get into all of that, let's have you give yourself a little introduction. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you said yes to talking to me.
So I think it's first, like I said, I'm more of like a software developer these days, or software developers advocate these days, but I actually love coding. So I sometimes identify myself as somebody that writes code, so typical software developer. But I'm very passionate about, a particular culture called open source, which is, looking for ways to better software. And so it's something that I've been doing for a couple of years now. And I believe that kind of like helped me to, see.
Is that why you're wearing the shirt? Is that why you're wearing the shirt that you're wearing?
So the story behind this t-shirt is actually funny because I was actually, I did a proposal to GitHub, a platform for developers, right? So the idea was to talk about open source in Africa. So, so open source is like I said, it's a cultural thing around software development. So, but it was, less and less Africans I would say less and less Africans don't really, I would say, I don't want to say see the value in it. It's just that they don't really understand it enough to, jump on it. So it was kind of a conversation that, GitHub want me to share to the world, particularly to people that are in the space, like, the hiring managers, the companies that enable, people to work on open source, and including like, foundations, right? So it was titled Open Source in Africa. Then after my talk, obviously, I got a t-shirt from GitHub. I think I have a hoodie here because it was actually something I was putting on.
Oh, you got all the swag.
Yeah, so it's there. So it's called GitHub Universe. It's kind of like their flagship event. So yeah, so I was there for November 2019 in San Francisco. I think it's Theater of Arts somewhere in San Francisco. It's like one of the beautiful places in San Francisco.
Amazing. You got to the US right before things got crazy.
Yeah, well, November, right? Yeah, yeah, November. Yeah, it was. I believe it was the last stable version. You know.
So wild.
Yeah.
So wild. Okay, well, is there anything else that you want to say about yourself or what you're doing these days at home?
Uh, yeah. Obviously, COVID is a global thing. So I think these days I spend more time in the house, trying to learn as much thing as I could. Also, I'm also running this organization called Open Source Community Africa, right? So we're kind of like hosting events virtually. So it's kind of like a new thing for us because
Cool.
we yeah we kind of have like chapters not just in Nigeria but also like in other African countries. So we're just working on ways internally to see how we could still preach the gospel around open source, but also trying to make sure that the quality still still stands. So yeah, so
Cool.
that's been keeping me busy these days. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And you're definitely an advocate for this. I mean, I love how you just called open source the gospel.
Yeah, the gospel. Yeah.
I
Some
love
people say I'm
it.
the pastors. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, Samson. Let's just dig in here.
Hmm.
So I was asking you before we started today, okay, what
Hmm.
US cities have you been to? Because I knew that you've been to the US.
Hmm.
You rattled off, I don't know, like well over 10. Because when you started, you're like, okay, Boston, LA, Cleveland, da, da, da.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, 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 slow down.
Yeah.
All of that to say, you've been to the US a good enough amount of times
Hmm.
to have a feel for it. And you've been to the East Coast, the West Coast, and you've been in the
Hmm.
middle of the country too.
Hmm.
So you have an interesting perspective. And okay, we're going through the
Hmm.
largest civil rights movement in history.
Yeah.
When you've come to the US,
Hmm.
have you ever experienced racism?
So I think one of, like yesterday, right, when we were talking about like how somebody from Africa sees racism, or, compare, I feel like I have a different opinion or different ideas from, the Black Americans because they know the system enough to know when it's not right. I don't really know the US Constitution. I don't know the laws, right? But I try as much as I can to bring in laws that I already know, like laws I abide back in my country, down to the state. Like for example, try as much as you can to be as good as possible. But for some reason, I since I don't drive in the US, so I can get pulled. I can I think most of the things that I've seen in the US is more of like getting pulled over, right? Because I don't drive. I'm not even old enough to drive. I think. No, I think
You
I
can
am.
totally drive. You have to
Not
be
in California,
16.
right?
16.
Oh, 16. But for some reason, okay, I can't
You
rent a
can't
car. Like
drink.
I can't rent a car and I can't drink, right? I
You
can't
cannot rent
rent
a
a
car and
car.
you cannot drink. Correct.
Exactly. Yes, I can't rent a car, right? And I think in California, I could use my driver's license in Nigeria to drive in California. I don't know about the states, but I know I did my research around that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm mistaken, but the fact is, so I feel like there's some things that I might not really notice because of how I grew up, again in a different continent and coming to the States sometimes because I'm primarily more focused on like I haven't been to the state on a personal reason before. It's more of like going for conference or I'm going to have a business meeting, I'm doing something, that is not usually around pleasure or or going to take pictures,
Totally.
just
And
solely
it's
coming to
organized
for
and you're with a group of
so
people.
great, right? So it's always around the corporate body taking care of me and all. So I think I haven't really been in that situation. But I feel like recently, well, in 2017 it was a bit different because that was the first time I came to the US. Um, so I think in 2017, more of like I was more in a closed environment with people. I didn't really go out that much. Um, then I think sometime around 2019 was the time I had the opportunity to see America in my own way, right? So, for example, I've been to in 2019 alone, I've been to California twice. The first one I stayed a bit longer. The second was, yeah, I did stay a bit longer, but not as beginning of 2019. So just to give an idea, I think there was a time I stayed. I can't remember which city was that. I think it's Paloma or maybe Santa Rosa, but I was in a neighborhood where I couldn't see any blacks. Again, I don't know how natural that is, but I could imagine that the white people in the US are more, they are more, they are, in terms of population, they should be more than the blacks. I'm coming from a place where, you know, 99% or 99.9% of people living in Nigeria are blacks, right? And maybe we have some few mixed people, people with, both colors, or people that just, came to Nigeria to just, become citizens or work in Nigeria. So it's not, it's a bit different for me, but given the fact that how my whole background is, right, I didn't see it as much of a big deal. But for some people in the state, it's kind of like really challenging, because I think I heard at some point that there's some particular neighborhood that are considered to be known for the elite people, like the really, really rich people. And whenever like Black Americans buy properties over in that neighborhood, it becomes a problem. It's like, oh, why are you here? They start questioning your source of wealth, which is a bit crazy, right? So I haven't been in that situation, but I've been in a situation where all I just do is, when I'm not in my computer, I go out, take photos, and go get pizza, or get burgers, or grab tuna, or, or try Chinese, right? And then at some point, work with friends to just, especially I think there was a time, most of the time I was in California in 2019 was more of like going to places to see where the wildfire affected, right? So yeah, so
Okay.
I think it's, yeah, I think it's yeah, because maybe I might be looking at it from the African side of things. I don't really,
Totally. And,
I'm
and
not,
I mean,
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
even that. I think you're looking at it, you're a tourist, you're exploring, you're having fun. It's a new place, you're trying all the fun
Mhm.
foods. Let me ask you
Yeah.
a different question then. What is the conversation now? What are people talking about in the US, or where you're in Port Harcourt, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you're in Nigeria. What's the conversation about what's going on in the US?
Um, well, I think one of the things that most people, well, I would say most Black people don't really know is the fact that, first, Nigeria is the biggest country when it comes to the highest number of Black people living in one place. It's a country with over 200 million people, right? I'm not really sure about the population in the States when it comes to the Black people, but I know it's the country with the highest Black people, living in a particular spot, like, Nigeria, right? So, and the fact that, we don't really have a lot of people here. Well, there are some people like me that are aware of what is in the state, and there's some people that generally don't care of what happened in the state. Maybe they randomly see it over, in CNN, or if they care about to watch CNN anyways, CNN, or um, on Twitter, right? Twitter is like the most place you see all these activities, right? Or Facebook, and they're like, oh, I see. So there's people mistreating people based on race. But for us here, particularly in Nigeria, I can't speak for other African countries, but I know there's a lot of tribalism you see here. Like you've been judged by your religion, you've been judged on where you're from, like which part of the state you're from, part of the region. So for example, like I think Nigeria is kind of like, there's this thing called well, so it's a country, yes, Black country, right? And there's the three most popular language, which is Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba. And I live in the Igbo dominated region, or Igbo influenced region, because it's in the south. Because the Igbo are more in the east, but it's the south is kind of influenced by the Igbos, in terms of tribe, right? Then Yoruba are more in the west, right? So still the same thing. So I think the Igbo and the Yoruba are more kind of like closer in geographically compared to the north, which are mostly Hausa and Arabic. So, and if you pay attention to the, I don't really like talking about it a lot, because I feel like maybe I may not be the best person to say this, but because I wasn't born then, I'm not really sure what happened, but I've read a lot of things to know what really happened. So I felt like, the Nigerian civil war, back in between, I think it was sometime around 1963. Oh, I can't remember what year, but I know it was around that 1960s. Um, it was the war between the Biafra and the Hausas. So the Hausas, the way it was tagged was like Nigeria and Biafra. So because the eastern region, um, for the eastern region, didn't really like the treatment that they were getting from the northern region. And there was actually a clip that I watched that was really, really funny, funny but also very strange. So I think within the Biafran War, I think it was before the Biafran War. I think so. Was it within the Biafran War? The Nigerian Civil War rather.
You
Uh,
could say
no,
whatever you want. I'm not gonna. Well, no,
yeah,
we have a lot of people watching. We have people watching live. They
yeah,
might
yeah, yeah. So
know.
I think it's more of like, so I think Nigerian Civil War best represents the title of the war. So I think there was actually somebody in the north, particularly in Sokoto, modern day Sokoto. Sokoto is in the north. So he made a statement that was a bit funny to me, but to some people, it could mean anything, right? I'm a very open-minded person, so I might not really be the best person to say, oh, I I think this is so crazy, because again, I wasn't born then. I didn't know the situation over back then. Nigeria was just starting. It just became independent from the British people, right? So he made a statement that was a bit conflicting, and in my opinion, I think it's really, really, really crazy for his fellow countrymen to be thinking that way. So he said that if there's a contract, because again, I think the Northern were the one ruling the country back then heavily, which they still do, but heavily back then it was so crazy. So he made a statement that if the Northerners have some kind of contract that that they feel like people within the North can't handle, like, so like, say for example, a job, and for some reason they couldn't find anybody within the northern part of the country, instead of taking the job to the eastern, the southern, or the western side of the country, they rather take the job to the white people. So they rather consider the white people first, and if the white people can't handle the job, then that's when they will consider, but by contract, to the rest of the country. And he was actually saying this in front of, I believe, maybe a white interviewer, and um, which was a bit funny to me, because consider the fact that this was a new country, what from independence, anyways, and for somebody making that conflicting statement was just shows how within the black within the blackness, right? Within the blackness. And when I mean blackness, it's not because your skin is black, because if I say, oh, Africa is black, then what happens to the northern people, right? I feel like black is a culture, is a feeling, not really like your color. Because Africa, most people don't really know this, but also Africa does have like white people, mostly in the northern part of the country, right? So with in the aim of like blackness, seeing a fellow countryman, not like somebody talking as regards to other country, but your fellow countryman making that statement, then it becomes like, hey, what do you do? Like, why, how do we even get here? So because of how diverse the continent is, I still feel like there's still a problem within the continent when it comes to we loving each other, right? And then Nelson Mandela did made a statement. I believe is a quote. He said, "The world will never respect the blackness, like the blackness of us, right? Until Nigeria, in quotes, he did mention Nigeria, until Nigeria love themselves, because again, it's the most influential country when it comes to Africa, the biggest in economy as of today, um, the most populated black country. In fact, the richest black man is actually from Nigeria. So there's a lot of things that always scream Nigeria. And whenever somebody in the States or somebody in Europe or somebody in Asia wants to judge blackness or want to mention countries, it's so easy for them to say, oh, you're from Nigeria. Oh, I know Nigeria, right? They might not really know other countries, because again, Nigeria is always in the face of the internet. It's among the first 10 highest users of internet. Nigeria is actually the top 10 highest user of internet. So they always have this great online presence on Twitter, Facebook, on YouTube, right? And then we have musicians, we have funny politicians, we have people living in the state, we have people, Black Americans that have a lot of Nigerian origin, because again, the great slave trade was more in the Western Africa, so it just kind of made sense to have a whole lot of Nigerian, most people living in the state that are Black, to have a lot of Nigerian origin, because it was coming from the Western African. So I feel like, um, coming from me, right? I feel like there's a lot of problems right now in the continent Africa that some people don't even want to even talk about what is going on in the States, because it's always like, why do we want to even talk about or advocate for these people when at home, we don't even like each other. Like it's so even crazy to the point that you can't even travel freely within the continent, Africa, right? And it just shows how crazy it is. And obviously, you might have heard about the xenophobic attacks in, South Africa towards other African countries. So when you start seeing things like this, I feel like the Black Americans kind of lose that voice because the if they want to trace their culture or to trace their lineage back to Africa, or if somebody wants to like, okay, because for example, if an American
Okay,
comes
wait, wait,
to
wait, 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 wait,
Nigeria,
wait. Hang on, hang on,
yeah,
hang on.
yeah,
Like,
so,
okay, I knew that talking to you, you are so fucking smart. I'm like sitting here like, wow, can just listen. Okay, so there's so much good stuff that you already said.
hmm
Interesting, I should say, is a better word.
hmm
Okay, before we dig into so much, I think it's
hmm
fascinating what you're saying is like,
oh,
okay, yeah, we think that.
can, can you give me a minute? Let me I need to plug my phone. It's kind of like because my phone is away from my laptop. So a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, a minute.
Okay, while he is grabbing his phone charger, anybody that is watching live, any questions, comments, things that you would like to know from Samson, you are more than welcome to ask or put in comments. And I will be sure to ask. And so happy you are joining us.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I have this bad habit of not charging my device.
I was just about to say, I feel like every time we talk, you have to get your charger
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
power is out or
I have this
something.
bad. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was going to ask you about, and I think it's so interesting because, you know, you're saying, how can we really deal with, um, like racism in America towards African Americans or the Black community when
hmm
we haven't even dealt with it back home,
Yeah.
the homeland,
hmm
which is kind of like a similar kind of statement, just thinking about like humans as individuals. Like, how can you
hmm
love someone else if you can't love yourself first? Right?
Yeah.
It's got to
Yeah.
start with self.
Mm.
And it's so interesting because that's a conversation that's not really talked about in the US. We talk about the history of racism literally starting with slavery,
hmm
not starting back home, maybe like in Africa.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to think about, especially because recently I was talking to this woman. I'm curious to know what you think about this as it relates to what you were talking about with like the
hmm
Blackness back home. She was
hmm
saying you can't talk about white supremacy without talking about anti-Blackness.
hmm
So what do you
hmm
think about anti-Blackness? Is this kind of what you were referring to at all back
Oh,
home?
what do you mean when you mean anti-blackness? What context? So just to better understand. Yeah.
Absolutely, meaning like kind of the maybe the lighter skin, because you
hmm
can't just look
Yeah.
at somebody and say, "Oh, you're black," and everyone looks the same. No, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. So well, first I would say
Like, what is your proximity to blackness or to whiteness? You know what I'm saying?
yeah. So for me, for somebody that I've been opportuned on a lot of times, even from, way back in junior high, like working with colored people, white people, not colored people. Um, for me, the least thing I even look at is actually if you're not my skin, because I always just focus on the thing I'm working on, because that's what I believe in. And that's even the time where whenever I see myself traveling, I don't even see myself as disadvantaged in any way. So because eh, you
Well,
know,
good. You shouldn't.
yeah, but that's the thing, right? I think it's a bit unique to some persons might have this mentality, but then there's some other people that also are very sensitive to informations. Like I actually went to I'll give an example. So I actually went to South Africa um, when the xenophobic attack was still a really big thing. In fact, there was actually a war. I wouldn't say war, actually, like a very great conflict between the Nigerian government and the South African government. And I was actually applying for my visa then, but I was doing stuff with this organization. So they had to pull a lot of strings in order to get in order for me to get the visa. So when I went to South Africa, and to tell you how crazy it was, I actually stayed in Pretoria, which is more white, like really, really white compared to other part of South Africa. And I noticed a lot of things, right? Like the jobs, well, it was so obvious. I feel like the racism, I felt more racism, like see a lot of racism in South Africa compared to the States. Because maybe it's because I feel like it's actually the reverse in terms of domination. Because in the States, people might say, oh, the white people are, in the US, white people are more than the blacks. But then when it comes to South Africa, the white people and the black people are actually more than 80%. And then the white people are actually just fewer than 20%. So
But
why
they're still
exactly? So
rule.
like
What the fuck?
why still feel like you're not enough, right? Like why still feel, and it makes more sense because for me, based on the histories that I've been reading these days, I think there was a time I was spending most times on YouTube, just randomly learning things around, histories, World War One, Two, Three, and just a bunch of histories. At some point, I was even paying attention to like different world power history, like the US, how the US got their independence and all, like just random things, right? There's one thing I think I noticed was the fact that this whole stereotypes that is happening right now is still going to be traced back on when it comes to racism, because I feel like yes, you can't somebody can't get power over, like I feel like you can't let somebody in your house except you open the door. And I feel like there was a lot of things back then that people just like, oh, maybe I feel like maybe one of the things might be religion, because if you look at the way the Bible, if you actually pay attention to the way the Bible or the way the words comes out, and you want to imagine a lot of things, it's always like, oh, somebody that is lighter is an angel, and somebody that is not lighter is, a devil, um, or the movies you watch,
Okay, I'm not
you
very
know.
religious at all,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it says that in the
Yeah.
Bible.
No, 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 no. Okay, because it's
But there's
words.
there's an idea. An angel
Yeah,
is
yeah,
painted in this like white dress with a white halo.
exactly.
You're right. And the
And
devil
there,
is just darker
and
in
there
your
was this even
mind.
thing, there was even a thing
Huh.
when on Twitter when that people were like, hey, that what is actually the color of Jesus? Because if you look at the thing about, I feel like one of the thing that I feel Africa became a bit powerless compared to, the black powerless compared to, the white people. If you look at it very well, I think it's more of like religion, because they kind of that was the only thing that got into people's head, you know. Um, I have a reason why I'm saying this, because if you look at it on the Bible says that Jesus was born in, well, Jesus' ancestors moved from, I don't know when, but they actually moved to Egypt, right? And Egypt has always been in Africa, and then he was born in Israel, right? And Israel technically became a thing from, within the Middle East, right? So it's more like, okay, so if everything makes that sense, why do you think Jesus is actually white? You know,
He's
it
not.
was
This
it,
has
it
been
was
like
it
a
was a,
huge topic of
yeah, it was a
conversation.
huge topic, right? So and whenever somebody goes on TV, and this is one thing that most people don't really know, is like when you start consuming informations, text based, video based, even audio, right? There's some certain things, you start understanding, slowly you start digesting a lot of things, right? And some people, and I'll give an example. Like I am somebody that I don't get I don't get moved by it all. Like if somebody's speaking British, like British English, right? I was like, oh, cool, nice. But then there are people that will queue to speak like them. But the truth is, the only way I got to speak this way is the fact that because I was growing up and hearing people, I've never lived in the States, right? And I don't typically sound as a Nigerian to some extent, because of my choice of words and my expression at some point doesn't really sound Nigerian, to the point that whenever I feel like I'm in a public place in the country, I always switch to pidgin. Like for example, like how are you? Then I use the word how far, because I want to feel Nigerian. Because the moment I feel like if I speak English, then there was this thing like, what is this guy trying to do? Because of how I sound. But also, there are some people that might treat me differently in a more smarter way. I might not be that smart, but in a more smarter way because of how I speak. But if you look at most of the things, is because what I do geared out of the Africanness. So it's more like they value things that are imported more than things that they export, if that makes any sense. So
It makes a lot of sense. Well,
yeah,
okay, no. It doesn't make sense. Like what
yeah,
you're saying makes sense, but
yeah,
it doesn't. Like
yeah.
it's like why is
You
I
know,
mean,
because if you go to school, like I've first let's try to go to music, right? Um, it's just recently Afrobeats became a thing, right? When it comes to the global acceptance, because even Nigerians back home don't like listening to pidgin because they feel like if you speak pidgin, right? Technically, pidgin is not an African language. I think it was more, um, well, it's more of like the Africanness language, if it makes any sense compared to English, because it was more of like the Dutch people came to West Africa and they couldn't speak English. And I think they were more of like mixture of couple languages that made the pidgin English, like the Jamaica patois, just like that, right? So, but whenever you see yourself speaking pidgin or you don't speak English, they're always like, hmm, I don't think this person is smart, right? Or I feel like this person should be poor, or I feel this person is a low class human. It shows in school, it shows in institution, it shows, in your day to day life. People always feel this pressure to do things that are not cultural, to the point that, well, luckily for us in Nigeria, we still have some cultures behind, but I feel like some other African countries, particularly in the South, are more trying to be white. When I mean trying to be white, not by changing their face to be white. No, I mean trying to adopt a lot of things that are considered to be white. So, for example, what do you
well, it's
say?
like
Like
the blackness that you were talking about before,
exactly,
the
like
cultural thing, the whiteness.
for me till date, right? I don't see any reason. Like how do you judge a first world country, a second world country, and a third world country? Because some people think that building skyscrapers and high-rise building is actually considered to be development. If that is true, then what happens to some parts of Europe that don't believe in high-rise building? Are they considered to be third world? No. So what exactly do you mean by, oh, this is a first world country, this is a second world country, and this is a third world country? And
I've
it's
wondered
not to
that
make
too. What actually
I,
makes the denominations?
yeah, and the reason why I feel like it makes more sense is the fact that the only second world country, the country that is considered to be second world in Africa, because every African country is considered to be third world, but the only country in Africa that is considered to be second world is South Africa. And if you look at South Africa, is a country with mixed colors, right? So it's like, oh, so you mean the white people can't stay in a country that is black and that is third world, so they just like look for ways to make it more theirs. So do you mean that we need to accept everything about you in order for you to consider us to be white? Like why like who gave you the opinion? Like I think that's one of the things that most people try to understand is who actually gave you the right to say this is the first world country, this is the
Oh,
second
well,
world country,
now
this is
that
the
you're
third world
saying that,
country.
I'm thinking about all the countries I've been to and like which ones weren't first world and which ones are. And like
Yeah. I
it
think I
is
think most of the
basically the
I think
white country. Like
I think
that's
most of like
fucked up.
I think most of the like North America and almost everywhere in Europe are considered to be first world, and then maybe South America and some part of Asia, most of the countries in Asia, maybe China, possibly. I don't know if China is considered to be first world country. Um, uh, but then because if they say if it's technology, then China is known to be more tech savvy than that of the States or any part of the world, right? So what are the criterias to be a first world country, right? So
Well, I've
you know,
wondered
so
that as somebody who's traveled because I go to these countries that are deemed third world or whatever the hell,
yeah.
and you go and they have more advancements and public
Hmm.
spaces, and I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
How does this make? Now that you're saying that,
Yeah.
wow, that is so crazy to think about. So,
Yeah.
where does so you think that it really? I was gonna say, where does it come from? You think it stems from religion, which makes
Uh,
sense.
well, I think for me is just that in terms of what a country is when it comes to where they stand, like first world, second world, third world, is how accepting are you to the white culture, to the white patterns, to to the whiteness, right? I feel
Oh,
like
or
it is
how many
more,
people, how many white people are there? Who's in power? I mean, I was
who's
more
in
thinking like,
power, I know, right?
but
So
where does racism start? Where does this like idea that white is superior, where does that come from? Is that what you were saying is religion, or does
yeah,
that come
yeah.
from somewhere else?
So there are many ways. So I think there are many ways, but in the context where I feel like the most one that still makes sense till date is the fact that it is religious wise. Because I think if it is because I've actually spent a lot of time trying to understand what still makes why people still feel like the white people are more smarter, or the white people are more um have, what's the word, like, have more,
Better,
just
like,
superior, right? Better,
yeah,
right?
just superior. Like, where the hell did that come from?
Then if you look at it, right, the Christianity, right, were technically imported from Europe down to Africa as part of the colonization package, right? So there's the language package, there's the color, and there's the religious package. Then there's like, oh, this is how you need to live, like the way of life package. Like you need to put on suits. You need to put on suits in order to look smart, but you can't put on traditional wear. You look like somebody from I don't know, like somebody I don't know, but somebody from somewhere, which is not considered to be elite, right? And it makes more sense because it's actually become a pressure for a lot of things, right? So I'm somebody that I don't see all the, like, they don't influence me in any way. And the reason why I feel like I'm using I'm speaking this way is the fact that because you have a certain way of listening and the way you speak. And I'm only doing communication with you because I don't want you to suffer by switching to pidgin, like saying, hey, half or trying to switch this conversation to my local language. Then I'm miscommunicating with you, right? But because I'm sounding this way doesn't mean that I'm leaving my blackness, because I can still talk to my mom, I can still talk to my brother, I can still talk to anybody in the country and not make them feel like, they don't really understand me, because at the end of the day, I'm communicating. The reason I'm using this tune, or the supposed accent, is the fact that I want you to better understand me because of where you come from. But now I don't think it's reverse. Like if you try to reverse the situation, then I feel like some white people, I can't say all obviously because I've worked with multiple people that are very, very accepting, and the only reason I feel like they are very accepting is the fact that they travel a lot. So I feel like when people are so ignorant, and if you pay attention to the supposed Nazis, the crazy people. Those are people that don't even have a national, like a passport, like a supposed passport, right?
That's the craziest thing to me. You're right. Yes.
you know, and they can't tell because they don't really know what exactly where you come from. Like the only time
Because
they
the
get to
second
see
you leave the
African,
US, you realize that it's not so fucking great after all.
so it's crazy. Like there was a time I was in London. I was in London for about 30 days, and particularly like central London. I think I was close to Stamford Bridge, Chelsea. So it's like a club that like, I support Chelsea. So where I was staying was more dominated by white people. So there was a time I was in a cafe and I was on call, like I was doing a meeting with somebody, and I was speaking. I think I was more speaking American than Nigerian in terms of language. And somebody was like, "Oh, you speak nice." I was like, "Okay, like what is that exactly? What do you mean I speak nice?" Like, do you know you sound really, really funny? Like I could actually laugh at you the way you speak, because for me, when a typical British person starts speaking to me, honestly speaking, I try not to laugh, but I can't laugh because that would be offensive, right? Because for me, it's not something that I hear every single day, so I don't even understand why you say mate or something else, right? Which is very different. But the fact is, because I've traveled a lot of times to understand that, hey, even in the UK, even in Britain or in the UK, United Kingdom, there are even different versions of English. In fact, like one of the biggest language war on earth is between the British English and the US English, right? Like I've been to offices that actually jokes around why the US people keep calling things in a funny way and why the British people keep calling things in a
Do
funny
you
way.
speak
Like
English? Oh,
You know,
American
or,
English. Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah, of
what do you
course.
use? Do you say lift or do you say elevate? Like what, like, you know, I could say I could choose lift or I could say elevate. But if I go to in in the US and say, there was a time I was in the US, I was like, oh, I'm trying to go to the elevator. The person was like, oh, what do you mean? I was like, I mean, trying to go to the elevator. Like, oh, do you mean lift? I was like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, you could just say lift. I was like, no, I can't. Like, I could say what I want to say. If you don't understand, you can always tell me that, oh, I don't understand. Can you explain what you're saying? Right? Yeah. So yeah, so I think, you know, language is a problem. Language, the import of language, you know, became a problem.
Who is that behind
Religious,
you? Who is that?
uh, yeah, somebody, yeah. So language was became a
Oh, I was like, I want to
religion
meet your
become
family.
yeah, everybody's outside, yeah. So yeah, so I think that's for me, the acceptance of this, and obviously because, and I feel like the reason why I would try to see if I could reason, or based on what I've read in history, what makes the Black American a bit powerless, in quote, as regards to where they are, is the fact that when the great slavery happened, you know, back when most African countries were still not civilized in the white people's term, um, because I feel like civilization was like forcing their culture on somebody else that doesn't want your culture, right? But when it was not civilized,
That's
in
a
quote,
whole other topic we could go into.
yeah, yeah, when it's not civilized, in quote, right? Because of how people were forced out of their homes and then taken to, because the Europeans came to Africa, took Africans, and then exchange Africans with mineral resources in the States. So they sell humans, um, in order to take, you know, minerals and then go back to Europe and produce stuff and then come back and sell in Africa, like sell gunpowder, use gunpowder to exchange with humans. So the fact that that circle happened, based on what I read, this is just based on what I read, it might be inaccurate, but based on what I read, I feel like because most of these people based in the US didn't see the Africanness in them. Yes, they are black, but they didn't see the Africanness in them enough to show it, because there's a difference between I come to Africa, I come to I come to the state and I say, oh, I'm from Africa. Like, oh, okay. Then I could say, like, I come from Africa, or there might be a way I might sound, and somebody might say, oh, he's not American, right? But then when somebody, a black person living in New York, goes to a supposed place that are dominated by rich and white elite people, or even let's say white people, because the richness is even like talking about wealthy based on color is a bit crazy sometimes. So when somebody sees themselves in that situation, the person, they always like, based on movies that I've seen, right? It's like, hey, where are you from? I was like, oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Like, you sure you're from Brooklyn? I don't know. You look different to me. You know, there's always this, you know, I feel like the black Americans always get this pressure of trying to explain to them the Americanness of them, which is funny because they were born, you know, born and they've lived in the US, and they're, and based on the way the law is, you know, if you're born in a place, you're considered to be, you know, you're from that place, right? So why do you keep saying, oh, I don't believe you. I don't believe you can live here. Or when did wealth became based on color, you know? And sometimes when I'm out of when I'm out of what's the word? I'm out of Africa or out of Nigeria, I tend to see myself doing a whole lot of things. Just the fact that I could do it, and somebody was like, "Oh, I see you do a lot of things in the US. You go to expensive places, stay in expensive hotels." I'm like, "Yeah, I can, because I can, you know. But I still I can do whatever I want to do because it's my money or it's the people that is inviting me. Like I can do it. Like, in fact, there was a time I was invited to. I was a keynote speaker for one event, and when I got to the, I think it was, I think it was in the US. No, I think it was in France. Yeah. When I can't remember what country, but when I got to the country, they started asking some questions like, "Oh, what is your intent of, coming to?" I think it was in the US. I'm not sure exactly, So I was saying, oh, I'm a keynote speaker. And they were like, oh, you're a keynote speaker on a technology conference. I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you have a proof? Do you have some kind of a proof to it? I was like, oh, you want to see a proof? You could just Google Samson Goddy on Google. You see, you just see some stuff. And then he was Googling some stuff. Like he Googled my name. I was like, oh, nice. Wow, you're doing really well as a young person. I was like, yeah. Like, I could even introduce you to my daughter to teach her, give her some classes on tech. I was like, oh, that would be nice. We actually just joked about it because obviously he saw that, you know, like I didn't even have to defend myself. The information that he saw, was like just rendered him speechless enough to just accept who I was at that stage.
Well,
So
you throw in a curveball because you are young. I mean, you're 20
yeah,
years old. That throws in a major curveball that, like, myself, I'm like, what? You know, that it has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that it's like,
yeah,
I'm 32,
yeah.
and you've already done, I feel like, more than I am. Like, what?
Yeah.
So you throw in a curveball, but
Hmm.
it's weird. In the US, it's not that you're not American, like your Americanness isn't questioned, but I feel like it's your like whole humanness or something that's
Well,
questioned.
well. I actually feel a bit because I always ask myself, why do you always say, "Can I see your ID?" in a very inappropriate situation, or why do you always say, why did you always question what you're doing and why are you here, right? Like, so for example, like there was this college student, she was sleeping in her room, and then somebody came and they were like, oh, you don't belong here. I was like, why do you think I don't belong here? Oh, is it because if you look at it, right, like, so there's some certain things that I feel might be these issues. The fact that, one, there are a lot of ignorance. In fact, I feel like there are a lot of, don't get me wrong, right? I feel like the white people are some white people, majority of the white people are so ignorant of anything that is non-white in terms of knowledge base. But on the black side, it's not the same. Like, because technically they forced information on us way back, right? And our school system is kind of in line of their standard stuff. Like, if I want to come to the States, I need to take a standardized test in order to come to the States to study in college, right? And then they don't teach me stuff that could be beneficial to Port Harcourt, but they could teach me stuff that could be beneficial to the States, right? Yeah, some people might say, yeah, because you're out of your country. But in my country, I was taught English. I was taught that I need to write British, right? I was taught on how to spell British, right? But I'm not in the UK, right? But are they teaching them on how to write Yoruba, or I'm teaching them how to write Igbo, or are they teaching them how to speak Pidgin? Nope. So I feel like because there's a lot of things that, again, there are multiple things that cause these issues. But speaking from out of the state, somebody that doesn't live in the state, I feel like, because I've been in a situation where I turned on the TV and I saw something about Africa that even me haven't seen. Like, there's always this thing like, oh, do you live with lions? I'm like, I haven't seen lions before, and no jokes, I haven't seen lions before in my life. I haven't been to zoo deliberately. I don't even want to. But why do you say I live in lions where I don't even know
Oh, the
where I can
the
find
the picture
lions?
that is painted of Africa, okay, which is crazy also because it's a continent. Okay,
Way
the
larger than
picture
the US.
it just a little bit. First of all, it's painted as like one thing, Africa. And that, like, the statement that I have heard over and over again as a little girl and as an adult is starving kids in Africa. Over and
Starving kids.
over. Like, that is the statement. Starving kids in Africa and, yeah, safaris.
Exactly. And the funny thing is
And
always
then you
this
hear a
there's
little
always
bit
this,
about South Africa and the
yeah,
history, like,
obviously.
but other than that,
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
unless you
Yeah.
decide to actually do research or go there and visit. So
Hmm.
yeah, to your point, that's why you get asked if
Yeah.
you live with
Yeah.
lions.
Yeah. But for us, it's easy for us to say, it's easy for me to know the like how many people knows that Sacramento is actually the capital of California,
And not Los Angeles or
and
San
not Los
Francisco or
Angeles,
something.
or not San
Yeah.
Francisco, right? There's a lot of things that I know in the US because it's kind of like I need to know in order to succeed, which is crazy, right? Um, Tech wise, um, in fact, like I feel like everything you're doing, you just need to know some element of whiteness as a black person, right? So I think maybe that's the whole term or the terminology of what they call white privilege, because you're white, you don't need to try. You don't need to know Nigeria in order to work for a tech company, or you don't need to know Nigeria in order to be a doctor. But I might need to know some certain things. I might need to know, um, you know, why do I need to disregard some kind of an African more like surgeries that might be done differently. I don't want to say locally, but differently. But I can't. That is not globally accepted because it was not in a standardized way. Which is, and it's funny when they say standardized, because their own version of standardized is always like, oh, it has to have some element of whiteness to it, right? So I feel like that's one thing that I feel like that's even one of the reasons why I still feel like I need to be in Africa for now, to try to understand, especially growing. I feel like I need to grow more while
Mm.
living here. I could always go to any place I want to. Like, I always have
You
good.
can't always go any place you want to with
Yeah,
coronavirus.
but not now, not now, obviously. Like,
But
this,
otherwise.
like, so I don't know if I mentioned this on the call from the last call we did. The first time I got my US visa to come to the States was crazy. I went to Abuja, which is the capital city of Lagos, of Nigeria, um, for the first time. And I obviously I wanted to go do stuff in Silicon Valley, and there was this guy, a supposed officer, was like, why do you want to go to the U.S.? It's a very interesting question, right? And the fact is, because I know exactly what I want to do in the U.S., I was able to start talking, and maybe I have a way of convincing people, or maybe there's just something about me of using the right word at the right time. I don't know what's my problem, but it took me 40 minutes to tell him why he needs to stamp a visa on my passport. And it didn't actually make any sense to me then. It was when I wanted to renew the visa, which was late 2019. I wanted to go to San Francisco. And in front of me, they were rejecting like a bunch of people, their visas and all, like, and when I mean rejecting, like, hi, how you doing? Good morning, good morning. What do you want to do in the States? I want to go to why. I was like, oh, sorry, unfortunately, I don't find you qualified. This is the reason why I'm rejecting you and all. Like, I have friends that have good reasons. They don't even give them the opportunity to explain themselves, and they just reject. But when I had the opportunity to go again to renew my
Damn.
visa, he was like, oh, like, as I was coming, he was like, oh, I see you travel a lot. I was like, yeah, I do. He was like, and you talk a lot in conferences. I was like, yeah, I do. I was like, oh, nice. So tell me more. Like, what is this conference about? And I told him, and we had a conversation. He took my passport. He was like, oh, so yeah, so you got your visa. We sent your passport back home, and and it's even funny because whenever I see myself landing in the US, like, trying to breeze through immigration, it's always very easy for me because of how I have some element of some kind of like white knowledge to it. When I mean white knowledge, some things that are not African, if that make any sense, right? Like,
No,
African.
I know what you're saying. There's
Because one, my name, okay, so one thing somebody actually told me something which was very interesting. He said, if you actually, if I have an element of Mohammed as part of my name on my passport, and I get to the US and they see, oh, Samson Mohammed Goddy, there's these stereotypes that
Oh
goes
yeah,
to,
you will
oh,
automatically get looked at differently, thought of
you know.
differently. It is fucked up.
So because my name, I feel like my name is conflicting. You can't tell where exactly I'm from, you know. you just see the passport. Well, you could tell because of the passport, like, oh, he's from Nigeria because it's boldly written Nigeria, right? But I just feel like the I feel like I'm in a unique position where there's a lot of things that I've done in the past, I've done in the past, and these things are kind of like speaking for me now, that it's so crazy to the point that they can't reject it. They just have to accept it.
No,
You know?
because yeah, you pass. You have this level of realness. There's that the whole thing
Yeah.
that is what it is called is
Yeah.
realness, and in this
Mm-hmm.
like the drag culture. But what realness
Yeah.
means is your proximity to whiteness. Like, can you pass? How
Mm-hmm.
much can
Yeah.
you pass?
Like,
How
and
real are you? And I think that like, you know, what you're talking about is what I was bringing up earlier when you have to have this element of whiteness, right? Like
mm-hmm.
it is the anti-blackness, but it's
Mm-hmm.
anti-culture. I mean, it's so many things
Mm-hmm.
all foiled into one. What you're making me realize on this conversation is that, you know, it's so funny because I'm always the kind of person that's like, we have to get out of like the US thought, like read
Yeah.
international news and educate
Yeah.
yourself. What I'm realizing now is I've been so sucked into a very, very US centric thought of
Yeah. Yeah.
racism and
Yeah.
where race stems from, and that it's a US issue, but
Mm-hmm.
it is not a US issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
That's
There's certain things that are absolutely.
I think I was actually talking to. Well, I actually had this conversation with a friend. So she's based in California, and then I also had another friend. So she's not from the UK, but she's Pakistani, but living in the UK. And we were talking about like why now? Like why is it why now? Like why are we acting on it now? Like why is the US taking the heat? Because if you look at it historically, the Europeans are to be blamed because they were the one that left. They were the one that left their border and came over to somebody's else border to try to tell people how not to leave. Because one, you need to understand that these guys still colonized the U.S. Right, like the British people colonized the U.S. or some part of the U.S. Right, and and I feel like the fact that because the US is actually known to be no man's land, like if that makes any sense, like there's this whole history about the United States that many people still wonder like who is actually a
Well,
US
that's the
person.
crazy thing. Why when Americans are like, make America great again,
Like
I'm
great again,
American. It's like you get that, like, unless you
yeah,
are a Native American, indigenous
American,
American, like, no, you're from somewhere else probably. And like, what the
yeah, 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 yeah.
so what is
So
American? What does that really mean?
like so and to give you an idea, there was a time in 2017, I was invited to come to an event, and I think this was the only time that I felt like I felt racism. But the funny thing was way, way, way away from the US, especially in France. And the way I
I
saw was
actually
the
heard
fact
that
that
France is worse than the US, and I only learned that
like
recently.
it's crazy. I'm not saying all French people, but I'm saying maybe it's so straight because of it's you speak English and you speak French and you get what I mean, like yeah. So there was a time in 2017 that I was okay. Yeah, I was part of I don't I was part of one of the most important speaker in the conference, and the conference organizers invested a lot in terms of flights, travel, and I was like 17 then, and I just came back from Kenya. I traveled. My first trip ever out of Nigeria was to Kenya. I came back. The trip was supposed to be sometime around the summer. So from the summer, I was then supposed to go to the US. So I had like 3 countries I need to go in 2017. Um, when I was invited, I've been doing a lot of things like volunteering a lot in some nonprofit organizations like Sugar Labs and ORPC, and of that, some like you could easily just search and see things about me, way back in 2017. So when I applied for the visa to go to France, well, I actually wanted to go to more Schengen space. The Schengen visa. I don't know if you know that like there's 22 countries in Europe that have one entry. You get one, and you can go to 22 countries, right? So I wanted to go to Spain. Did want to go to Netherlands and then go to some other close by countries. When I applied for the visa, I gave every single thing, including health insurance and bank statement and everything, like literally everything. Guess what happened? They didn't technically they did not reject me because they sent my passport back. They sent my passport back 2 days to the time I was initially supposed to go to the airport to fly. 2 days before. So when I got my passport, there was no reason why I was rejected. I called the organizers back in Bordeaux because it was in Bordeaux. So they had to talk to some governors. I think they actually talked to the governor of Bordeaux, on some type of a governor in Bordeaux. And the guy was doing some research trying to get what happened. And at the end of the day, they was like, no, the French people or the French government didn't just believe you're capable of doing what you're doing, right? And I kind of received it differently because that was the first time ever that I was supposed to be out of the continent, and this was so obvious because we just did a research back in Kenya, and I wanted to do more about it in stuff. And it's not even about, oh, you don't have enough money, because there was a lot of there was actually technically there was thousands of euros, showing in the account that says, oh, he can take care of himself. There were paid flights, like really, really paid flight. In fact, we actually chose Air France, like, so you don't even have an excuse that, oh, maybe he might have some issues. Like, I chose Air France, to go to
No,
France,
we
you
don't
know,
believe that you have the capabilities.
you know. So,
The
you know, it become a bit crazy to me, you know, and I also got to understand it a little bit when I eventually went to France last year. uh and I feel like maybe back, obviously I became more human. I feel like I have less EQ, so I don't really notice my environment a lot, especially when things don't really concerns me, so I don't pay attention to things that it's not really so if I have, like, if I feel like some things are not my business, I don't pay attention to it. Like, I don't read meaning to things, right? I can go to whatever, I can go eat at something. If you talk, I don't hear, or I don't feel like you're talking to me. I don't need to ask you, oh, what are you talking about? Like, why are you, I don't care. I'm usually somebody that just don't care about things, right? And somebody actually told me something when I was in San Francisco, because we did this conference called Open Source Community Africa, and we raised a couple of thousands of USD to do this conference in Lagos. And when I went down to the state, I was talking to most of the potential funders, and somebody actually asked me a question, not in a racist way, but in a curious way, like, Samson, the reason I'm asking you this question, don't get me wrong, the reason I'm asking this question is the fact that, one, you're young, and you're black, and you're from Africa, and you're in a supposed the most valuable neighborhood or the most valuable area in the world, right? Silicon Valley, and you don't feel any pressure, and you schedule meetings with CEOs and program managers and people that are known to be decision makers, and you just go to the meetings. You don't care about the age experience, or the experience by age, or age gap. You just go in and talk and do whatever you want to do, and you get what you want. Like, why don't you feel like you're disadvantaged? In my head, I was like, why would I feel like I'm disadvantaged, right? Because, one, I want to do something, right? I have an idea, and I want to fund that idea. And yeah, I know some companies that believe in that idea, and unfortunately, 99.9% of those companies are in the white region, like in the US, or known to be, in the US. I don't want to, it's crazy when I say US is white region because it's so diverse, right? So I don't feel any need why I need to be I I I I need to feel a bit awkward. Yeah, you might point it out that, hey, you're 20. Why are you asking me for $20,000, or why are you asking me for $15,000, or asking me for 5,000? Like, what do you know about that money? But the fact is, because I already have some kind of a record somewhere, or I've had some understanding, or I've gone out of my comfort zone in order to know some certain things, right? um, and speaking to these CEOs and people that had access to these funds, and at the end of the day, I raised everything that I wanted to raise, and I went back to
Of course
Lagos,
you
and
did,
we did a
because you know
conference.
you have the
And
capability. You have the
exactly,
confidence. It's like I was talking to this with someone else and I said, "When did you feel different?" And they're like, "What do you mean?"
yeah,
And I was like, "Oh, wait, what I mean is, when did somebody else point out that you were different, like make you feel
Yeah.
different, because it's like, no, it's like, I'm just a fucking person. It's when someone else
Yeah.
says, hey, you should be disadvantaged. Are you disadvantaged by the system? And you're like, maybe, but I don't feel that way. Like, what if someone else puts it on you? So anyway, Samson, we've talked about some amazing things. I'm so sorry. We have to wrap it up because we've been talking now for almost an hour and a half. And I just want to give you an opportunity. I mean, what do you think there's going to be definitely people from all over the world watching this. But most of the people, I imagine, at least from my side, are going to be from the US. Hopefully we have a lot of people from your side watching.
I think I can see them on my screen right now. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. But I guess, like, what do you think is what message would you like to leave behind? What else do you want to say? What do you want the people to know? How can we change this?
So I think this is something that is unique to not just, I don't think it's race. I'm not talking about, not for you to be a much better human, because I think I've seen it work for me, is the fact that when you become less ignorant on things, then you have much better idea on how to deal with those things, right? And like I told you, right, I spent most of my time understanding cultures, right? Like understanding cultures, understanding language, understanding histories. And if I go to the US, I know for sure that there's some certain things I can't say, or there's some certain things I don't need to do, because if I do it, I become, you know, somebody can easily identify that, hey, you don't belong here, because obviously I spend much time understanding the US culture. So I feel like if you need to be really diverse, like diverse in terms of understanding. Like I think mentally speaking, you need to have a lot of diversity, or you need to see things in different angle. Like if you travel a lot, if you leave your comfort zone and you try to go into something else that are out of your comfort zone, I feel like you will understand the world in a much better way. You know that not everything involves around you, or evolves around you rather. And because I feel like the people that are known to be racist in some form are people that just don't have idea of what Africans, or what somebody in the south or somebody in the north goes through, right? You don't really know the struggle, you don't really know the success. You can't even pin the success. You can't even tell what is being successful without understanding how valuable those things are, right? Like I could speak English and also speak, like, so for example, you could tell I'm a much better communicator. I'm like, oh great, have you tried speaking my language and also maintaining your own language? Have you tried that? But I can do mine, but you can't do it. So who is actually better here?
Right. And who are you to judge me on that if you haven't tried it? And
if you haven't tried it, right?
It's what you're talking about is a shift in perspective. It's trying somebody else's shoes on, right? And going for a walk in them. And that literally opens whole new worlds. And once you start knowing that stuff, and you can't unlearn it, there's no going back. Just why, like, there are, I don't know if you know this, but there are like people that used to identify as like neo-Nazis, are like super, super conservative in the US, you know, and then all of a sudden they've never met a black person before, or they've never met a Jewish person before. And then all of a sudden they meet someone and they get to know them and they become friends. They're like, whoa. And the whole world changed. And they're like, how did I believe that before?
I would say, I think it's like the first time I kind of understand the concept between the, like the LGBTQ movement, right? Because again, look at, so first, if I go to the state and I see somebody that looks differently or identify differently, well, culturally, because I'm where I'm coming from, I don't see any reason why you need to say or fault me for not, how do I put it, accepting who you are, because again, it's not known to where I'm from, right? But because I want to be much better, I want to be able to not judge or not do anything. What I did was I went to the internet, or I met some friends, right, that are part of that movement, or part of or that group, right?
Community.
Community, right? That community, right? To try to understand, because if I look at it biblically speaking, because again, if you're from Africa, there's high chance that you might be either in the Muslim side or in the Christian side. Like there's 50% chances that you need to fall under one of this religion, right? And on the Christian side, I can't speak for the Muslim side. On the Christian side, you're known to be a bit reserved if somebody doesn't do things that is, how to put it, like
Heteronormative is what we would call it in the US.
like it's just like the idea the idea of gay people, right? It's not in our law, it's not even in religion speaking, it's actually spoken against. But I've been friends with many people, I've worked with many people that identify, as part of being part of that community. And by the time I stopped looking at things from the way my country shaped things and the way the book, the Bible that I've been reading shape things, or I don't think the Bible was being discriminating, but the way people misinterpret some certain things towards the Bible, right? It just makes me see that the world is just beautiful, right? I know there's a lot of crazy thing going on out there, but it's not as crazy as as everybody painted it to be, right? And it's funny because as part of the opportunity for the Open Source Festival, the conference we did in Lagos, right? There were actually two people that were part of that community, right? And they came, and I'm like, whoa, like this is awesome, like this is great. And when some of the persons, like for example, like we had somebody that are non-binary, like can address by typical pronouns like they and them, right? Like I know sometimes it's hard for some Nigerians, but I also see some Nigerians at the same time, whenever they say, oh, she is, automatically they just stop and say, oh, I'm sorry, I mispronounced, I used the wrong pronoun. But the fact is, we're getting to understand each other just makes it much beautiful, right? So it's just a point of trying to understand, like, why are you actually being reserved in some form? Like, are you trying to be? Because I feel like ignorance is actually the top problem.
It is. And this is the biggest message that I feel like I've learned over and over again, where I'm getting is question everything. Question everything. Because from the second that we're born, we're being trained and molded to say from our parents, from school, whatever, believe this. But there are 1,000 different options for how to live and what to believe and how to be. So question everything and figure it out for yourself, which includes educating yourself, like you're talking about, Samson. So it's been amazing talking to you as always. I'm just like blown away by you. Every time I end talking to you, I'm like, I need to go educate myself a little bit more. It's just amazing. Is there anything
I need to stay away from the internet, probably. I spent a long time.
Says who? I don't know. I think it's amazing. You have a wealth of knowledge. It's awesome. Anything else you want to say before we end this?
I think we're gonna get past through this. I like the fact that everybody in the US, or some quite number of people in the US, are making this effort to make this movement work and try to make people understand that, hey, these things are actually wrong. So I feel like if the US can get this right and make it work, other, like the rest of the world will understand, because everybody kind of look up to the US because it's like, the world power and all, right? So I feel if they could get this done, then things would start changing for the better in terms of being, race and all. Yeah. Let's
hope we do a better job handling this than we have done handling the coronavirus. Okay. Let's hope so. I hope so. But you know what? If there's one thing that does give me hope, to wrap it up, is people like you, is 20-year-olds, the young people that are like,
my lights just went off.
I know. I saw it happen. What timing? See, that's our sign.
That's our sign.
But it's seriously, it's people your age that are knowledgeable, leading the charge, talking, having these conversations, and have hope too. So thank you for being awesome. I'm going to stop the live stream.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the One World, Your Story podcast. If you enjoyed hearing this story and you wish to hear more, Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, and of course, follow us on Instagram at OneWorldYourStory. From all of us here at the One World Your Story podcast, we are sending you so much joy and love. Have a wonderful rest of your day.